welcome to our second edition of our webinar series for the aspiring leaders. We are so excited to have you back tonight. Tonight, we are going to talk about building your skill set and professional and personal learning. We have two exceptional school leaders with us tonight. We have Elise Concilio and Tim McDermott. I'll let each of them introduce themselves personally when it is their turn. You can catch all of our webinars on the sparkedservices.com website or Dream Big Mentorship website, and both will have notes to go along with these webinars. So I'm going to jump right over to Elise and let her start. So Elise, thank you for being here tonight.
All right. Well, thank you, Jody. I'm so excited to be here. This is a great opportunity for everyone that is being involved. And I am actually a first-year principal, so I'm learning as I go. And hopefully some of the things that I have learned, I'll be able to pass on to some of you that are interested in getting into administration. A little bit about myself. I am a first-year principal at John F. Kennedy Catholic Schools Upper Campus. We are a Catholic school in Northeast Ohio in Warren. I service grades 6 through 12. I have a little over 300 students in my building. In the past, I was a 8th grade science teacher for 11 years at LeBray Middle School, which is a small rural suburban school in Warren. During my time through teaching, and I was a volleyball coach for 6 years, and as a JV coach, and 8 years as a head coach, which coaching is a wonderful experience to get you ready for leadership and being in the principal seat. So if there's anything besides teaching that I could recommend, would be actually coaching a program. So that was a great experience. After I got my administration degree, I was looking for a principal's job and kind of just running into a lot of different situations that, I was always the runner-up. I was the bridesmaid, never the bride, it seemed. And so a job came open at our local ESC. And so I took a job at the Trumbull County Educational Service Center as a curriculum and instruction supervisor for classroom technology. And I was helping teachers and administrators integrate technology into their classrooms. I was helping data analysis. Really, it was an amazing training ground for a lot of the things that you do as an administrator. And so a lot of the experience coming into this, even though this is my first year really as a principal's job, I have 3 years experience kind of in that administrator aspect, being a consultant for over 20 districts in our county. So that's kind of where I am coming from. So going along with our notes, Jody has looked at our notes that Tim and I have put together and kind of made you a note sheet. So if you're following along, the first thing that I have suggested, and I have kind of just suggestions as a teacher, what can you do to get ready to be a principal, or what can you do to make yourself marketable as someone looking for a job? So the first thing was kind of to broaden your horizons. If there's anything I can say with teachers, sometimes are like this. Everything in your classroom is what is super important to you. And that's great. And that's what, as administrator, you want them to be passionate about what they're doing in their classroom. But a lot of the times you're not seeing the whole picture. And so look at different pedagogies other than your own subject area. So I was a science teacher. I'm very hands-on. I like doing labs and things like that. English teachers have a very different perspective on what their classroom is. And then even if we cross over from core subjects into the arts and physical education and things like that, definitely have, different styles of teaching and things like that. So one thing I can say is try to get in touch with other people, what their passions are, and appreciate them. And you don't have to be an expert on every subject. And one of the things that I thought of when, how am I going to go in and how am I going to evaluate a art teacher? I don't know anything about teaching art. I can't pick concert A from concert C. I could probably calculate the hertz for you if you want me to, but I can't really do anything musical. How am I going to evaluate these teachers? And so it's all about the teaching part of it and the pedagogy of it and what's best practices and being able to pick up a conversation with those teachers so they trust you when you do come into their rooms and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. Tim is going to talk about how to, professionally develop yourself and different ways that you can get information. But one of the things I would say is, don't worry just about your subject area, broaden your horizons. And again, that goes in with coaching and different programs. If you can be an advisor for student council, if you can be an advisor for different clubs and things like that, anything that you can, really get involved in helps you look beyond what your subject is helpful. The second thing that I think is really helpful is that if you have a good relationship with your administrator, if you can ask them, go to your administrator and say, I have my degree, I'm looking to be an administrator. What can I do to help you? What is there that I can participate in? If you can mentor new teachers. So we have the RESA program in Ohio where, you have these resident educators. Can I mentor somebody? Can I go observe somebody else? Or can another teacher observe me? Can we get involved with doing those things that you might do as an administrator in the future? Hopefully everybody's heard of ed camps, ed camp style presentations. So teach PD sessions. When your district has, time for professional development, offer to teach a session instead of hiring somebody else out. If you go to ed camps, there's a lot out there that you can go to and kind of get your feet wet. It's very low stress. Everyone's very casual at them. You can certainly put in to speak at a conference if you're interested in that. Help deliver that PD, because that is going to be part of your job if you're aspiring to be a school administrator, and being able to assess that PD. And even if you're hiring someone out to come in and speak, you're going to need to make sure that that PD is being implemented across your building. What does that look like? Are we having frank conversations about that? So if that's something that you can get involved in, do that. Another thing is, there's so many things that our administrators are doing that are not necessarily, a lot of things are confidential, or a lot of things, teachers it can't just be shared with anyone. But when I was a teacher, we did the ACT Explore for our 8th graders. I know it's called something different now, but that was one of the things I asked. Well, can I help organize this? Can I go to the meeting that they're going to have? I'll put it all together. I'll create the schedule for our 8th graders that day. And it was just one thing I could take off of my principal's plate and I could do, and then I could speak to it and say, hey, I've organized this. I've looked at scheduling, which is sometimes a nightmare, and being able just to be that extra set of hands for your principals. So that's another thing that, offer, as long as you have a good relationship, that you would be able to help them out. The third thing that I have is technology. As a integration technology person, I think that it's important to stay up on what's new and what's out there. Communication tools. A big part of my job is tell your story. If you don't tell your story, then somebody else will. And that's not always what you have control over, if somebody else is telling your story. So you need to be on Twitter. You need to be on that social media, even if it's as safe. You're only putting information out there that's positive. I have a blog. I have a principal's blog. If you want to read it, you can get onto my Twitter, and it's linked there as the pinned post. But it's just a way for me, and one more way to communicate. Do I think that all of my parents or all of the teachers read my blog? No, of course not. But I have been at family weddings and someone was sitting there and said, oh, I read your blog. I know. And I said, oh, so excited. So make sure that you're good at getting those stories out there, and you're not always posting the same stories. So if you're very involved in athletics, maybe you make it a point to look for the speech and debate team next, and do some of those kinds of things. I communicate with my teachers over Remind. I have a group text, so I'm able to communicate that way. Obviously, emails. My email's linked to my smartphone, so I'm always, make sure I respond in a appropriate amount of time. I think Jennifer talked about some other tools like Voxer and things like that in the last webinar. So all of those communication tools, it's not that you have to use every single one every day, but know what's out there, know what's going to be best for you, and how to appropriately use it. I'm a huge fan of Google Drive, Google Classroom. I think it's a great way to communicate. My teachers, we have a spreadsheet for behavior tracking and a spreadsheet for tardies. And since I'm at a small school and it's really me, and I have a dean of students that teaches half a day, we use this behavior tracking, so the teachers log on, they're able to get to it. There's tabs across the bottom for what grade the students are in, and it can tell you, you know, if there's a dress code violation, if it's the same kid, if it's a tardy. And now we've gotten to 3 tardies. And so it's an easy way for all the teachers to communicate with the office, and we can make sure that everything's getting taken care of instead of a paper trail. And we have that there for us. I love spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are always the answer, if you ask me. Another thing is that Google Classroom has been great. I feel like a dinosaur for saying this, but I wasn't a teacher when Google Classroom was a thing. It was actually piloted the year that I went to the ESC. So, but I did start using Google Classroom with my staff for professional development. So anytime we have professional development, I post it there. I'm actually doing a book study with my staff this year, Teach Like a Pirate. So a little shout out to Dave Burgess. So I post any of the assignments on there. Some of the assignments that we had, they had to read part of it, and then it was a virtual, like there was a slideshow, and each of them had one slide that they had to fill out. So that was part of their PD and how they communicate. We hosted an hour of code on Monday, which was awesome. And with my 6th through 12th graders, since we are a one-to-one district with Chromebooks, I was able to make an hour of code Google Classroom where I posted all the activities for them and the intro video. They went to their rooms, they had their headbuds on, and they were able to listen to the video and do all the hour of code. So that was really cool. So even if you're not, you know, you think as a principal, maybe you're not using Google Classroom, it's been actually really cool for me. Some other things that you can do to build your skill set. One is in Ohio, we have OTES. So if you're in a public school, you need to have, you know, that evaluation system. You can be credentialed to be an OTES, you know, evaluator. You don't have to be a principal to be going through those classes. So as I was looking to be a principal, I made sure I took the classes and I got certified for that. So it's just one more thing that you can add, that you can say you've been through that process. Another, you know, data analysis skill, something that's maybe not always the most exciting, but the person who is hiring you is probably a superintendent. And in my, you know, experience, superintendents are pretty concerned with the state report card. They're very concerned with data. That's what they're looking at, and they're looking at their principals to be able to know that. So, you know, how can we use data without being a slave to it? It's not, I don't like the data driven, the data influence decisions, because we're still looking at kids at the heart of it all. So how can we use data in a responsible manner? You want to make sure that you're able to analyze strengths and weaknesses in data, and make sure that you're being able to analyze it appropriately, so that you're saying, you know, I understand what the data says. This is how I would actually implement it. This is how I would be able to tell the next year if any of those things worked. So make sure that you know any of that data that you may be expected to know wherever your location is. And the last bit of piece of information I have is about your resume. When you're ready to go out there, and so you think you're ready to be an administrator, don't be a slave to the one-size-fits-all resume. You don't need one sheet of paper. All of your stuff doesn't have to fit on one side. When I interviewed for the current position that I have, I actually created a website. I did my resume on a canva.com. It's a graphic design site, and it basically just had my goals, my key skills. It did not have every single bit of information that I could fit on there, but it did have a link to my website where I had all of the projects I had worked on. It had all of my work experience as a teacher. It had all of my work experience as a CNI supervisor. So I was able to get much, much more information. You know, I had pictures of my kids and my family on there, things like that, other things that were important to me. So, you know, make sure, be creative, show who you are, be passionate, and people are going to hire that person. They don't want to hire the person that you think is perfect. They want to hire the person that is the perfect fit. And all of these things are just things that you can do to make yourself, you know, as well-rounded as possible. So I hope I didn't talk too fast. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tim so we can get you going. Thanks, Tim.
Well, thanks. That was awesome, Elise, and hopefully I can build on the things that you talked about already. So, thank you, Jody, for the invite and reaching out and asking me if I want to be a part of this. So I really appreciate that. And so to start off a little bit about myself, this is my 6th year as a elementary school principal, my 2nd year at my current school. I'm in Batavia, Illinois, and we are, I guess, like a mid-sized school district. We have 6 elementary schools, 1 middle school, 1 high school, which is kind of cool that we have, like, it's a 1 high school town. The high school just won the state championship in Illinois in the state playoffs, so everyone's super excited about that. Before I was a principal, I held several different roles. Was a student services coordinator at an elementary school for a few years. I was an interventionist for I think 3 or 4 years, and then I taught 4th grade for 9 years. So yeah, I've done a lot of different things, and so hopefully tonight I can kind of talk to you a little bit about my experiences and how you can invest in yourself. So you're prepared to take the next step and be a leader in a building. So I gotta double check my notes here, but I think I have 6 points to kind of talk to you about this evening. So the first one, it really starts with that personal reflection, so knowing who you are, and there's lots of different ways that you can do that. One is, there's a number of personality traits, inventories that you go out and do, so you can know what your strengths are and then what are opportunities for growth in areas where you can improve on. And the other areas is you think about personal reflection and knowing who you are is something that we don't do enough of is really taking some time during the day or during a week where you're carving out that white space where you're really not doing anything. But it's a time to think and reflect and getting to know, hey, I think I'm pretty good at these things. How can I build on them? One of the things I go back to is, Simon Sinek talks about, start with your why, and understanding why are you, as a person who's pursuing a leadership position in a school, what's your why? Why are you tackling that? What do you stand for? That helps. And I think Elise talked about this earlier, but that really helps with this idea of finding the right fit, finding the right school for where you want to be and the impact that you can have. Simon Sinek talks about this idea that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So it's about being authentic and demonstrating your authenticity, and that really comes from knowing your why. So really get to know yourself and your strengths and those opportunities for growth, and then think about a plan to work on those areas. So how are you going to continue to work on areas of strength? And I'll talk a little bit about what that could look like. And then also those areas where, hey, this is not a strength of mine. How can I sharpen that and get better at it so I'm prepared when it comes time to, taking a position in a leadership in a school. One of the things that like 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, I defended my dissertation, which was like super exciting. And I did a study on, I know Lisa's like, oh my gosh, really? One of the things that I learned, I did a study on principal practices that impact or influence how teachers collaborate. And I went out and I did a qualitative study. So I went out and talked to teachers in different schools, talked to administrators in different schools and specialists. And what I found was something that isn't really shocking, but there's some key leadership practices that allow schools and people to flourish and to be able to collaborate and work together. And those are, the ability to build trust with others, being vulnerable. And I just listened to this interesting podcast the other day about vulnerability, and the host of the podcast talked about like that's your being authentic, your authentic self, and vulnerable. Like that's your greatest he called it a weapon, which I don't really like that idea, but it's like your greatest tool, your greatest way to connect with others is that vulnerability. Being an effective communicator, being patient, a good listener, willingness to change, being open, transparent, and patient. So, like, as you get to know yourself, you think about where's your skill set in those areas, and what are some things that you can work on to get better. So again, you're fostering a school where people are able to collaborate. It's a healthy, positive culture. So one of the ways that you can grow is really to develop that mentee-mentor relationship. So finding someone who can invest in you and spend time with you and grow. So that could be formally, and I know Jody set this awesome formal mentor relationship for aspiring leaders, or it can be something informal. So Elise talked about, connecting with your building principal and letting them know, hey, I'm interested in becoming an administrator myself, a principal myself, and asking for those opportunities. For me, there's a number of people that I can think back in my career and thank for where I am today, and investing in me and spending time with me to help me get to where I want to go. It's also, being willing to ask questions. And so one of my mantras is like, you never go alone. So when tricky things come up, never be afraid to ask a question about, hey, this is how I think I should handle it. What do you think? So you get that feedback, and which helps you with your decision-making process in the future when tricky things come up, how they can be handled or how they should be handled. The other piece is ask for that critical feedback. Ask for ways where you can grow, and don't be afraid of that feedback, because that helps you with your journey. And knowing, hey, is there something that I'm doing that is getting in the way of me becoming a building principal or into a different leadership position. And then also make sure that with your mentor, you're sharing where you want to go. Talk to them. They have so many connections. Interesting as you move up into leadership positions, that network, that world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and you get to, as you make those connections, you can say, hey, I know somebody in my building who's interested. There's a position open. So make sure that you share what you want to do, where you want to go with the leaders that you work with, and they can certainly help you get there. My third point about investing in yourself is this idea of reading, and reading, like, try to read every day. I know that's becomes really hard when you're in the thick of it. And like, that's sometimes the last thing is, hey, I have 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Hey, let me pick up a book. I'm going to, read this next chapter, or I'm going to read a blog post. And the reason I say that is that's where you can really invest in yourself and your own personal growth. And I highly recommend reading leadership books. And it's something that I have done for a number of years. And I heard this, I can't remember if it was a podcast or an audio book by Andy Andrews. And he was talking about, and I don't know if this is true or not, but he said this and it really struck me, that the average adult only reads 2 books a year. And I was really surprised by that, because I guess in education, we read a lot more than just 2 books a year. But this idea that, you need to invest in yourself, you need to take that time and read to grow. And so I have some recommendations. One of my favorite leadership books is Good to Great. I think it's a business book, but I certainly think the leadership principles can be applied in schools. It really makes you think about, who you are as a leader, how you want to be able to support your organization, your school, and move it forward. I would recommend anything by John Gordon. He's a phenomenal author. He has tremendous books. The first book I picked up was from him that I read was Energy Bus. It's a quick read, but it's really impactful and powerful. And then, John Maxwell is another great author, and he writes. He's always coming out with new books. And I would highly recommend anything by John Maxwell. The other piece is, when you have a PLN, you start sharing blogs and blog posts with one another. That's another great way to think about, refine your thinking, see different perspectives, get that diversity of thought. So if you're not reading books, you can be reading blogs. That's a quick read each day. And then even though it's not reading, but I happen to be a huge fan of podcasts. So I have about a 30-minute commute to work. And so I'll listen to podcasts on my way to work or on the way home. Also, I listen to podcasts. It gets kind of boring at the gym listening to music over and over and over again. So, especially if I'm doing cardio. So I will do, listen to podcasts. So there's a few that I would highly recommend. And again, some of them are leadership. Some are outside of leadership, but it kind of makes you think about your perspective and the way you think about things. My Bad by John Harper is a great podcast to listen to. So, he interviews people in the field and where they've made mistakes and how they've learned from those mistakes. Success Through Failure by Jim Harshaw Jr. And I love his podcast because it talks up his focus, and when he interviews people is very similar. He talks about how people learn through their failure and how they grow from that. Dose of Leadership by Richard Ryerson. And then I'm kind of a Gladwell geek, so Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell. And I just love how he takes things and twists them and makes you think about the world around you and, the relationships you have with others. The fourth area that I want to talk about is for investing in yourself and growing and is the idea of writing. So this is where reflection comes in, right? We don't take enough time to think about or reflect on our day and how things went, especially when we have difficult decisions that we're making or we had an awesome day. But to really spend that time in reflection. So that can come in a couple of different ways. The first is, I had a former principal tell me one time that, he had a journal that he kept in his first year as a principal, and he just jotted down all of the things that transpired. And then as the year ended, he went back and could see, how much growth he made personally, but how much growth the building made overall. And so he really recommended the idea of using a journal. It was the ongoing reflection, the ability to think about things that are happening in the building when things are challenging or when things are really going really well. And again, looking at that growth. The other piece of writing that I would highly recommend is the idea of blogging. And this is a great way to grow personally and professionally. It really forces you to think about what's happening in your world, what's happening in your classrooms, what's happening to students. And then it also allows for the sharing of ideas. And it really makes you think about sort of what you value and what's important to you, and helps refine all of those things. So again, as you get to know who you are as an individual and in your leadership styles and the kind of school that you would like to lead one day and how that would look, the blogging and the journaling really help push that. The other two, we've talked, and I think Elise talked about this, and I think Jennifer talked about it last webinar, was this idea of growing your professional learning network, your PLN. And that can happen in many different ways. So that can be face-to-face or virtual, right? So the idea is you're connecting with other educators or leaders, and it allows for that sharing of ideas. So, as I think about, my journey, I happen to do two different master's programs. One was in teaching and learning, and it was an online, virtual, and it was a really interesting experience. But there wasn't as much connection with the other students in the class. And the second one was a traditional cohort model for my 75, and we were with the same people each class over and over and over again, and kind of forced us to get to know each other, and still making those connections today. And the same thing for my doctoral program. I got to learn from others. Oh, lights went off in my office. You like the technology of that. But with that being said, it's so important to be able to connect with other people and people who are like-minded, people who have different thinking, different thoughts than you that challenge your thinking. So again, that could be people in your building, that could be people in your district, that could be people that from master's programs, and then there's obviously there's Twitter and there's Voxer and there's other ways to connect with educators, not just in your local area, but across the United States as well. So, sharing of ideas, collaboration, and then the idea of participating in ongoing conversations, things that are happening in education today. And it's just amazing how much you can learn from others that are in similar situations as you. And the last piece, as far as investing in yourself and growing professionally, is really through the professional conferences and organizations. So I've been lucky enough to been able to go to several different national conferences and then obviously local conferences. And again, this allows for the opportunity where you go to sessions and you can learn about what's happening in other places and bring those ideas back into your own setting, or think about, hey, I can, one day when I become a principal, I would like to implement this strategy. So there's a few, obviously each state and local areas have their own, but some national ones that I would recommend. I've attended the National Association of Elementary School Principals Conference. I know secondary has one as well. Learning Forward, I have attended their national conference. It's pretty awesome. And then ASCD. So those are all national conferences. They have great keynote speakers, great breakout sessions. And again, you can pick and choose, and that allows you to grow and kind of get to where you want to go to. I will tell you, this goes like super fast, and hopefully I didn't go speak way too fast. I know Lisa's laughing. I'm looking at her. But I just want to thank Jody once again. Thank you, Paul, for recording. And I hope, I was able to at least provide some insights for everyone who's looking to become a principal. So I hope everyone has a great night. Thanks.
I want to thank both Elise and Tim for all your time and your planning to put this together. I was so fast jotting down everything you said because you guys gave us so much great advice tonight. So thank you very much for inspiring all of us as aspiring school leaders. So thank you both for all your time tonight. And I know after a busy work day of being a principal all day, that this was something else. So we certainly appreciate your time, and we look up to you and thank you for all this. So thank you. And we want to tell everybody else to continue to log on or follow the hashtag Aspiring Leaders, because we're going to do lots more of these webinar series. We have a lot of mentors as part of our program that has lots of topics that we will be sharing with you in the upcoming months. So follow our hashtag or jump on the websites, sparkedservices.com or Dream Big Mentorship, and you can watch the webinars after we post them to YouTube, and you'll find all the notes as well. So again, thank you, Tim, thank you, Elise, and thank you, everybody. Wonderful night tonight.